Welcome to Nampo Park in the Free State town of Bothaville for the 4x4 Mega World 400, round 4 of the 2021 South African Cross Country Series. Another tough weekend in the dust and rain saw the crews slug it out over 2 rounds of the championship. But for now, we'll concentrate on round number 4. As always, all the action is proudly brought to you by Toyota, Ural, Ford and Pirelli. After the tough Toyota 1000 desert race, the SACCS action moved from Uppington to the Free State town of Bothaville during the first weekend of October. But the weekend turned out to be just as tough as the desert, thanks to an innovative double-header format that saw the crews compete in round 4 action on the Friday of the weekend and round 5 on the Saturday. The total race distance for the weekend came close to a gnarly 800 kilometers of racing. But this week we'll take a look at just the first 400 of that, round 4 of the season. The big news on the event was that 4x4 Mega World had come on board as event sponsors, and we caught up with Dion Fenter to understand why he decided to support this event.
I'm sponsoring the race because I love the sport. That's the main reason. We just love the sport, so we put some money back into it.
But before we get tucked into the action from round number 4, let's get a quick recap of the championship to date. After 3 rounds, including the fearsome desert race, this was the lay of the land. Class FIA saw Dakar legend Janelle de Villiers top the standings, though his lead over Brian Baragwanath in second place was only a slender 3 points. Lance Woolridge was in third, with 2 points further back. The Class T fight has taken a turn for the worse as far as the Horn brothers were concerned. They started strong, but a DNF at round number 3 allowed both Force Prinsloo and Malcolm Cock to pass them, with Cock topping the table going into round number 4. In Class A of the Specials, Lance Trathrui had a 39-point lead over Timmy Howes, with Clint Gibson 6 points further back in third. The increasingly popular Class Gs had Cecilani in the lead of the title chase, with Dean Bradbury in second and youngster Kent Rutherford tagging third. So that's how the numbers stacked up, approaching the midpoint of the season. Clearly, there was plenty to play for in Bothaville, especially with 2 rounds on the trot. We caught up with Jason Fender, part of the 4x4 Mega World crew, who'd be feeling some extra pressure at his home event.
You know, with all the supporters from home coming to watch us, we're gonna try our best and do a good weekend.
But Fenter wouldn't be the only Class FIA driver to feel some additional pressure. TGRSA's Henk Ladegan missed round 1 of the season due to injury and was desperately trying to claw back the points he lost as a result.
Yeah, no, it's a double-header this weekend, so it's going to be an interesting weekend, a tricky weekend by the looks of things.
At the same time, Ford's Lance Woolridge and brother Gareth will be trying their utmost to spoil the Toyota party, especially Lance, who found himself a handful of points ahead of Ladegan after 3 rounds.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a tricky start to the race weekend, but looking forward to it. We've got a good start position.
Yeah, very happy. It's been a very long break, I think nearly 3 months.
Interestingly, the competition at the head of the field would relax somewhat at round number 4, as log leader Janelle de Villiers offered to sacrifice his championship aspirations in order to concentrate on the development and testing of Toyota Gazoo Racing's all-new GR DKR Hilux T1 Plus, a stunning new Dakar Challenger featuring bigger wheels, more suspension travel, and a turbocharged petrol engine.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's exciting, you know, to have a first race with a new car. You know, we've obviously done quite a bit of testing so far, so we're going to use this as some more testing.
But the Toyota wasn't the only new car in the service park in Bothaville. Redline Motorsports Revo also broke cover recently, and the 4x4 Mega World 400 would be its first competitive outing. Behind the wheel would be experienced racer Konrad Rautenbach.
A bit miserable today, but I'm sure the car will perform, so we're excited to see how it goes.
More innovation in the paddock came from Richard Leek and Zahir Badania, who had quietly been tweaking at their Nissan during the off months, though tweaking it would be selling the new car somewhat short, as the pair explains.
Zahir and his team done an awesome job. Yeah, all I can say is we're excited to be back.
And finally in Class FIA, Ernst Roberts had also upgraded, this time to a brand new Century Racing CL6 buggy. He hadn't had much time to get to grips with his new steed, but the 4x4 Mega World 400 would certainly give him that chance.
It was more on the bigger picture, you know, to doing the Dakar with it. So I just had 2 hours to practice and get used to the car.
In Class T of the championship, Malcolm Koch and Son France had taken over the lead of the title chase, and the burly Freiburger was cautiously optimistic about the race ahead.
Yes, I think it's going to be interesting. It's very wet out there. We had a good year so far.
And over in the special vehicles, Lance Strathuri still had the bit very much between his teeth. The big man was well in command of the season and had every intention of increasing his lead.
Yeah, we're here to race. We're here to race and trying to win overall. That's, I think, Odin and I's objective, to come and race and be up in the front.
Sandra Jonk, who also campaigns in Class A, would be fielding a new car in Berteville, showing that new cars weren't only restricted to the crews in Class FIA.
It's a new car for me, and also new weather conditions, making it quite challenging and interesting.
So those are just some of the stories leading up to the 4x4 Mega World 400 Round 4 of the 2021 SACCS. But in Berteville, it was time for the talking to stop, the flag to drop, and the race to get underway. There was some heavy weather on the horizon just before the start of the Pirelli qualifying race, but that certainly didn't dampen the spirits. Not after nearly 3 months without racing. For Route Director Evan Hutchison, it was a joy to be back doing what he loves best.
We got busy a little bit earlier. We've been here for the last couple of weeks. I think I've been here for 5 weeks on and off, and it takes a lot of work to put one of these routes together. But luckily we've got the new Ford Ranger, which is not just another bucky. You know, it really is something spectacular for the off-road.
It was an early start, with the first crew setting off at 7:30 in the morning. Not that that seemed to hold anyone back though, and over in Berteville, it was finally time to go racing. With a full race to fit in on the Friday, the organisers had decided to run a short, sharp qualifying race of just over 13 kilometres. This would be followed by 2 racing loops of 180 kilometres each. With such a short qualifier, the times were always going to be tight, but nobody could have guessed just how tight it would end up. The Class FIA fight was always going to be a close-run thing, with Lotterhan and Cummings pushing to score valuable championship points. But they'd be facing stiff competition. One man who could always be counted on to be in the mix is Chris Visser in his Toyota Hilux. The burly farmer didn't hold anything back at Berteville and went 5th fastest as a result. Conrad Rautenbach and Rian Kraling showed that their new Redline Motorsport Revo had plenty of potential, even so early in its life. They went 8 seconds faster than Visser to take 4th in the qualifier. Only a single second separated Rautenbach from the crew in 3rd, that of Woolridge and Vonk. The Ford Castrol cross-country driver clearly also had the bit between his teeth. Had Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy been eligible to score points, they would have slotted just ahead of the Ford crew. But as things turned out, it was Lotterhan and Cummings who took 2nd place on the qualifying podium, 14 seconds ahead of Woolridge and Vonk. This left only the top step of the podium, which fittingly went to the champions from this year's desert race, Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer, in their Century CR6. The big buggy made mincemeat of the qualifying route, and the Century crew pipped the mighty Toyota Hilux to the post by 16 seconds, a powerful performance. Interestingly, the 2nd fastest car over the qualifying race was the Class A bat of Lance Strathuri and Adrian Roots. Since they race in a separate category, we can't really mention them in the same breath as the Class FIA cars, but still, the King Price Extreme crew were really quick. Their nearest competitors came in the form of Lut Duprier and Sion Swart in the Farmers Meat Striker. They were 36 seconds behind the flying Strathuri, but definitely in with a shout. Billa Buertas and Jay Pretorius, also in a King Price Extreme Special, went 3rd fastest, some 1 minute and 29 seconds behind the leaders. They had Sandra Young and husband Jaco just about a minute behind them in their new Motonetics KEC Racing Bat Viper. While we're talking about the special category, let's take a quick look at the battling Class Gs, where log leaders Cecil and Eladis Lani had a somewhat disappointing qualifier, posting only the 4th fastest time. They'd have their work cut out for them come the main race. Youngster Kent Rutherford and navigator Cabello Mokinyani posted the 3rd fastest time in class, 39 seconds behind the leaders. They had navigator, now turned driving ace Jeff Minott, 24 seconds ahead of them in 2nd place. And finally, the winners of the Class G qualifier were former champs Werner and Leon Mostert in the number GO2 Can-Am Maverick. But what about the crews in Class T? Well, this was always going to be one hell of a battle, with the top 3 cars separated by only 7 seconds. Third place in the qualifier went to Dylan Fenter and Vince van Alleman in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, a great result on their home race soil. Just 1 second ahead of them was Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen in their Neil Woolridge Motorsport Ford Ranger, another solid performance for the Ford crew. Victory in the Class T qualifier went to the father and son pairing of Malcolm and Franz Koch, also in an NWM Ford Ranger. The Freiburgers showed their class by pipping their teammates by just 6 seconds. So let's briefly recap those results from the Pirelli qualifying event. In Class FIA, it was Brian Baragwanath and Kramer on top, followed by Lottachan and Cummings. In Class T, Malcolm and Franz Koch did exactly what they set out to do. They had teammates Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen just 6 seconds behind them in the 2 spot. In the Class A's, once again, Lance Strathuri and Adrian Roots take the qualifying win, with Louis de Pria and Tian Swart in second. Keith and Andrew McInerney were the only runners in the Class P. Finally, the Class G battle seemed to return to regular service, with Werner and Leon Mostert taking the honours. Usually, the end of qualifying would signal the end of day 1 of a race weekend, but not this time. Nope. In Bothaville, it was time for a short break before the crews would take on the main race of the 4x4 Mega World 400. So join us after the ads for all the action from the main event in Bothaville. Welcome back to the farming metropolis of Bothaville in the Free State, or rather, famous Nampo Park that played host to both rounds 4 and 5 of the 2021 South African Cross Country Series. The 4x4 Mega World 400, and you've guessed it, the 4x4 Mega World 400, take 2. But more about the second one next week as we now focus our attention on round 4 of the 7-round championship. Qualifying is a tricky event. You don't want to lose too much time, but you also don't necessarily want to be the fastest, as this means you have to open up the road with few, or in some cases, no tracks to follow. And on the 4x4 Mega World 400, that's exactly what Brian Baragwanath had to do. Just 2 minutes after the Century Racing CR6 of Brian Baragwanath and co-driver Leonard Kramer dropped the hammer, it was time for the big dog, Lance Strathuri and Adrian Roots, to do the same in their King Price Extreme Bat. Although Toyota Gazoo Racing's Henk Lottachan and Brett Cummings lost a few seconds during the qualifying race, they would have been absolutely okay with it, as they were third on the road, with tracks to follow and very little dust to hamper their progress. Next up, the brand new Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux T1 Plus of Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. There were lots of eyes on the progress of Toyota's new Dakar weapon as de Villiers was putting it through its paces in preparation for the 2022 event in Saudi Arabia. But seeing that the car wasn't officially entered or eligible to score points here in Bothaville, we'll keep you informed on how it went, but we'll rather spend the time to cover the gladiators that were fighting for race victory. And one such crew is no doubt Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk, who were after their second race win after taking the brand new Ford Castrol Cross Country Ranger to a debut victory back in March at round number 1. They were followed into the Free State abyss by the futuristic-looking Redline Revo, piloted by Zimbabwean Conrad Rautenbach and Rian Kraling, who had to go flat out to stay ahead of the hard-charging Chris Visser and Albertus Fenter. Over the next few minutes, a total of 37 crews spread across all the different classes all got their 4x4 Mega World 400 challenge underway, and the area around the Nampo Park was buzzing once more.
What does your family tree look like? A towering yellowwood, a reaching willow, a mighty baobab? Or is it more like the exceptional aspen forests of North America? This complex group of separate individuals is a surprisingly simple and unified whole. Much like a family, each new generation of growth builds on the last, creating an enduring legacy. The shade under which your family will sit for years to come. Your family, your legacy. Let's talk.
Over the past few months, battles between South African young guns Henk Latekan and Brian Bergwanath and the two Woolridge brothers, Lance and Gareth, have become the norm. And this Friday morning at the 4x4 Mega World 400 would turn out to be no different. As with any world-class sporting event, these guys had it all to play for. Latekan clearly had the bit between his teeth as he quickly closed the gap between himself and early race leader Brian Bergwanath to take the overall lead, closely followed by the Fords of Lance and Gareth Woolridge, who also managed to move past the big Century CR6 of Bergwanath, who predictably had a little trouble finding the route from first position on the road. And as if it wasn't enough of a challenge to fight against tough men and women in Premier Class FIA machines, the racers also had to deal with Mother Nature, who added an extra bit of a challenge during most of lap number 1. Times down the order were fairly close as a result, with Toyota Gazoo Racing Shamir Variawa and Donnie Stassen hot on the heels of the Revo midway through the race. Variawa had to keep an eye out for a determined young Jason Fenter, who was on home soil in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux and doing a great job of chasing the leading pack, whilst also keeping Ibn Basson and Gerrit Skitter at bay. The Redline Motorsport driver is still in his first season in the sport, but improving on every outing at every turn of the wheel. When the times were added after the first loop of 200 kilometers of racing, it was indeed the name of Henk Latekan who topped the timesheets. Let's hear from the man after the morning loop.
It was really difficult. It was raining so hard at some stage. The wipers couldn't keep up. I couldn't see much. We were going like third gear down the straight.
After qualifying in pole, Brian Bergwanath had slipped now down to fourth at the halfway marker.
It's very difficult because there's patches of rain and you get some areas where it's super snotty and some areas where you're really getting good traction. So every now and then you come in and there's just no brakes and you hope for the best.
Biggest jumper after loop number 1 was Lance Woolridge, now into second place.
It was really slippery and in the rain, like, you know, when you're on a highway and you just can't see type of thing. So it was really heavy.
Let's move on to the Class Ts. This is the class for South African buckies and crews that have no intention to race on the international stage and therefore don't need the Class FIA machines. But besides a few small things here and there, such as a solid rear axle instead of independent rear suspension, Class T is not that much different from the Class FIA cars. What's more is that the old rivalry between Ford and Toyota is as fierce as ever, with Ford seemingly getting the advantage over their Toyota rivals as of late. Local men Dylan Fenter and Vince van Alleman were hoping for a good result in their 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, but Lady Luck had other plans for them as they were forced to call it a day within sight of the finish line due to a broken control arm, whilst championship points leaders Malcolm and Frans Koch were also forced to the sidelines with broken suspension after hitting a rock. Multiple class champions, brothers Johan and Werner Horn, were keen to get their title fight underway once again, but the pairing from Malalan had troubles in qualifying and had to fight their way through the field. Fourth in class was as high as they could get at the end of the racing day, finishing ahead of Bapi Rabaluza and Fani Maiwa, who recorded their second finish of the season. With the Malalan Toyota missing out on the podium, it meant that the Class T podium was going to be an all-blue affair, filled with NWM Rangers. But who would be standing on which step? When the checkered flag was waved, it was Christo Rose and Onno Olafia who claimed third spot, a career best after swapping out of Class Gs at the end of last season and jumping up into Class Ts for 2021. There was some daylight between Rose and the Ranger of Bernard Johnston and Jan-Harm Hugo, who did extremely well to come from stone last to claim second spot on the podium. And with Malcolm Koch gone from the Class T equation, there was an opportunity for Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen to make their mark, not only on the event, but also on the overall points table. And that is exactly what the Ermelo-based businessman did. Prinsloo put his head down and drove through the wind and rain to claim the Class T victory and the championship points lead at round 4 of the 2021 SACCS. He was a happy chappy.
Yeah, great. It's a long time that we've been waiting for the win. Yeah, and we're just thankful for it.
Let's shift our attention over to the monstrous machines in Class A of the special vehicle category, starting with the big dog, Lance Three and Adrian Roots. When the rain came, conditions weren't great either for the two-wheel drive machines with no windscreens. We caught up with Big Lance at the halfway marker as he told his tales.
No, the traction's not the problem. We can't see. But I suppose it's the same for everybody else. But we're battling a little bit in our car.
Rain, wind and overall treacherous conditions were only some of the challenges the guys and girls in the special vehicles had to face. Add to this broken gearboxes and suspension problems, and the race sure took its toll. Sandra Labiskakny-Jonk and husband Jaco were forced to retire the Motonetics KEC Racing Bat Viper with a broken gearbox, whilst it was hugely disappointing for Lut de Prier and Tian Swat to retire the Farmers Meat Striker with broken suspension after such a good qualifying run in the morning session that placed them number 2. This allowed Bula Boertus and Jay Pretorius to cruise to a well-deserved second place in Class A after surviving both loops in the King Price Extreme Porter. But at the front of the Class A field, there was once again just nothing that could get in the way of Lance Trethuri and Adrian Roots, who stormed yet again to another victory, their 4th of the season on the trot. And on to Class G we go, the entry point to the fast pace and excitement of South African cross-country racing. But on this day, the pilots of the normally very reliable Mavericks found the going tough, with several championship contenders and former race winners forced to call it a day. These included teenagers Kent Rutherford and Cabello Makinyeni, who failed to finish loop number 1, whilst clutch problems and a broken control arm forced Jeff Minott and Gerrit Snyman to the sidelines as well. It got a lot worse for former Class G champions Werner and Leon Mostert, who endured all sorts of problems that included a loose ball joint and overheating issues, putting the car in limp mode once again. Championship points leaders Cecil and Eladis Lani broke prop shaft in loop number 1 and decided to take the massive 10-hour penalty for not completing the loop. After fixing their machine, they started and finished loop number 2, earning valuable points in the process and somehow hanging on to their championship points lead at the top of the charts. And this allowed Basil Besadenhout and Rickers Hutting the opportunity to claim their first victory of the season in the Motonetics KEC Racing Can-Am. After staying out of trouble and keeping their machine in one piece, they would be stood on the top step. And here it is, the official results, and it shows the name once again of Lance Trethuri and Adrian Roots right at the very top of Class A, ahead of Bula Boertus and Jay Pretorius. Class G also had only 2 official finishers in the form of Basil Besadenhout and Rickers Hutting. The bubbly must have been bittersweet after a very tough day at the office for all the competitors who survived round 4 of the South African Cross Country Championship. Let's hear from our winners of each of the classes in A's and G's.
Very, very moist. We had a great race this morning with Henk and with Brian and that, and then it started raining, and unfortunately it is what it is.
You know, it was really tough conditions, lots of thick sand, and then also a section where we had to ride in the rain. Very interesting, but also very fun, yeah.
With nearly 20 Class FIA machines taking the starters' orders at the beginning of the day, a top 10 on any round of the South African Cross Country Championship Series is an achievement, let alone on a tough one such as the 4x4 Mega World 400. And 10th is exactly what Deelwold van Breda and Johan de Toy managed to achieve from behind the wheel of their Century Racing CR6 buggy. Jason Venter and Jaco van Aert battled a few niggles inside the Mega World Hilux on their home race to finish 9th, around 5 minutes behind the brand new Century CR6 of Ernst Roberts and Henry Kerner, who got stuck for a minute or 2 on loop number 1 and picked up a puncher on loop number 2. Redline Motorsports' Eben Besson and Gerrit Skidder continued to impress in their Redline VK56 by crossing the line in 7th. 1 spot behind Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk, who were running near the front of the field early on, but the Ford Castrol Cross Country Racing Ranger lost time when it got stuck for a while, dropping the pair down the order. They were just 10 seconds behind the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux of Shamir Variawa and Donny Stassen, who fought their way up the field into 5th overall after starting way down after the morning session in 13th. We were now nearing the sharp end of the field where a fierce battle was raging between the country's fastest drivers in the country's fastest cross-country machines. And few drivers are as fast as Chris Visser alongside Albertus Venter. The Vryburg farmer has won many races and titles in the past, but on this day he had to settle for a 4th place finish. Beating Visser to the third step of the podium was none other than Ford Castrol cross-country driver Gareth Woolridge and Navi Boyd Dreyer. Woolridge drove a superb race after qualifying down in 12th in the morning session, so the Ford did well to work his way through the field. He had a busy day. And then there were two. Century CR6 versus Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux. Brian Baragwanath versus Henk Ladergan. Desert Race winner versus defending champion. These two have enjoyed some spectacular battles over recent times, but this time around, it was the champion that came out on top after some sensational driving, combined with Baragwanath having to open up the road during the first loop. But as they say, that's racing. When the flag was waved and the times were added, Ladergan came out on top with a victory margin of nearly 3.5 minutes. And what's more, after the team sacrificed de Villiers as far as the championship is concerned, Ladergan's victory put him right back in contention. Confirmation of an emphatic victory for Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings over Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer, with the Ford of Lance Woolridge claiming third this time around. The Class T board shows Prinsloo and Vermeulen taking the win over Johnston and Rose. Time to enjoy the taste of victory for our production car winners, and time for both Baragwanath and Ladergan to reflect on the battle in which Ladergan came out on top.
Yeah, it was good, good fun. Pity we gave away so much time the first loop, but the second loop it was nice, match to match, to be able to pass the Toyotas and just bring it home first on the road.
The team's done an amazing job, and I mean, for a car to go flat out all day and not have major issues is really amazing.
And that was that for round 4 of the 2021 SACCS. Round 5 will take place the very next day at the same time and same place. So join us next week for the next installment in this great motorsport drama. All this action was officially brought to you by Toyota, Ural, Ford and Pirelli.